Hello, and welcome to Metachemistry. This is episode 134, and we're back with a mission briefing episode. In our mission briefing segments, that's where we take a look at an ITS mission typically, and we kind of break down to its simplest parts. We go over how you score, what the objectives are, of course, and then we talk about how do you go about accomplishing this mission. And generally these are not going to be super specific and your tools will vary by faction and all that jazz, but these should give you an idea of how to tackle a certain mission. And for this one, we're talking about an ITS 17 mission, Critical Intervention. And Critical Intervention is kind of an interesting one. It is the first ITS mission, at least that I can recall, that is an asymmetric mission. And so we'll get into that in a little bit. But before we do, we'd like to take a moment to thank Mo Games, sponsor of Metachemistry. Mythic's Online Emporium is an online supplier of Infinity that you can find over at mo-games.com. And as part of their sponsorship, our paid patrons of any level get a 10% discount code to that store. And in addition, whether you're a patron or not, you can be entered in every month to win a $40 coupon code just by being a member on our Discord server and selecting the Mo Games role there. Just to note, you have to have a US shipping address so that Mo can get those sweet new minis over to you. Because what's better than games? Mo Games. And so for this episode, we have Ian and myself. Ian, how are you? How have things been going? Have you gotten more game time in?
No, unfortunately, I have not gotten more game time in. I've been working a little extra. Actually interviewed for and got a new position. Same company, just bigger department I'm taking over. And trying to get things ready for the transition to that in a couple weeks, and then also make sure that we get restaffed and stabilized in the old department before I leave, so that things will run smoothly everywhere that we can. So that's been the majority of where my time has been going. Also, I moved into a new house about a year ago, and now it's finally, we're getting around to getting the basement finished out. So I'm working with some contractors and taking bids. So I'll have a nice, awesome basement nerd cave thing when this is all said and done. So that's where a lot of the rest of it is going. So unfortunately, not a whole lot of games, although we do have a local Warcrow tournament coming up in a few weeks that I'm definitely going to be participating in. So that should be awesome.
Yeah, super exciting. Yeah, moving is a very long process for sure. At least in my experience.
Well, and then
it takes a long time to
storage unit will finally get cleared out, which I don't have a problem. It's only 20 by 40 feet and stacked 10 feet tall. Floor, all the way front to back. So it's fine. That's totally normal.
Right. Don't we all have one of those?
I mean, most usually people have it in their house. This is just the stopgap until I have someplace to put it in the house by having a finally finished out basement.
For sure. Yeah, for me, I've just been trying to get back into the swing of things after the holidays, getting regular games in a little bit more frequently. We've had a few new people stop by locally, which is great. So been running some demos and getting in a couple regular games. In fact, my last game just this past week was a game of Critical Intervention, as it turns out, and playing some Tunguska. Just because, I don't know, they just seem to be the one I want to go back to most often. So that, and they just are in the bag, which helps. But yeah, it's been good. And so, as far as Critical Intervention goes, it's kind of an unusual mission by ITS standards. There have been other fan mission sets that have done things like this before, but I don't believe ITS has ever had a mission where there is an attacker and defender, and there are asymmetric objectives like this.
I agree. I don't believe it. We've had one. And I say that looking over the ITS packets for the last 10 years or so and not seeing anything that's really outside of everybody's kind of trying to do the same thing. So this one is kind of a first, it feels like.
Yeah, which is really exciting. It's a fun mission, it's an evocative mission. I think that the gameplay fits very well into kind of the narrative that the mission is trying to portray, which is awesome. And so in this mission, the attacker and defender will have different objectives from one another, largely, with a little bit of overlap. And attacker and defender, interestingly, is determined by initiative order. Not even necessarily who chooses initiative, but whichever player ends up going first is automatically the attacker, and whichever player is going second is therefore the defender.
Yep.
And so, one thing that's kind of fun about that is that ideally, to be prepared for the mission, you kind of need to have a plan for both options because you can't guarantee what role you'll be playing. But before we get too into the weeds, um, Ian, do you want to take the attacker objectives and I'll take the defender objectives so that we can kind of lay our groundwork here?
Absolutely. So to kind of set the scene for the mission, because board layout is actually going to be very important. This is an objective room mission, and there is an exclusion zone in it, although that only applies to the attacker. So that they can't just have stuff run up on the objective room right off the bat. There is inside of the objective room, there is a data pack that needs to be extracted by the attacker. And outside of the room, on the defender's side in the left corner, there is a console which has several effects in the game. So for the attacker, the objective is to get the data pack and get it back to your deployment zone. Now, that's easier said than done because that data pack is locked, and I believe it is a -6 penalty to unlock it with a specialist.
Pretty hefty.
Yep. So you get 1 point for unlocking the data pack using that console that's on the outside left corner of the room on the defender side. So you have to get around there, and if you unlock it by using a specialist to pass the whip check on that console, it'll unlock the data pack. Now, that's one objective point to get that. Extracting the data pack, whether you unlock the console first or take the -6 to get it out, is 2 objective points. The trooper that extracts the data pack, if they're alive at the end of the game, that's a point. Now, something very important here, the data pack, unlike in other missions where you extract things, is non-transferable. So the model that takes it is the model that holds it for the rest of the game. And if that model dies, then the data pack is gone. Now, that said, I believe that if the model goes unconscious and you are able to bring them back up with a paramedic or a doctor or engineer, if the case may be, that you would still retain the data pack in that situation.
Right.
But they have to be alive at the end of the game, and that's 1 point. And if that trooper with the data pack is back in your own deployment zone, there's 2 more objective points. If you're able to dominate the server room at the end of the game with more points of models, then that's 2 more objective points. And if you kill at least a quarter, or in a 300 point game, 75 points of your opponent's models, that's another objective point. And then there's 1 classified to round it out for the 10th point. So there's a lot of ways to get points, but it's very, very concentrated around getting the data pack extracted and keeping the guy that got it out alive. That's where the majority of your points is going to be. That those three things: extract the data pack, make sure the trooper lives, and have him in your deployment zone. That's 5 points. That's half the points available for the mission as the attacker.
Mm-hmm.
So which is
so a
pretty
lot
awesome.
rides on that. For sure. And then the defender is primarily just trying to not let any of that happen, is most of those points. So the defender will get a point if the attacker does not unlock the data console using that antenna. They get 3 points if the attacker never extracts the data in the first place. If they do extract the data but kill the trooper carrying the data, they get 2 points. And they get 3 points if they dominate the server room or the objective room at the end of the game. And then killing half the opponent's army, or typically 150 points, will get them 2 objectives, and then they also have 1 classified worth 1. So primarily, like half the points for the attacker go into stealing that data, but not quite half will go to the defender, and they have to be a little bit more aggressive. They have to kill more points, and it's worth more to do so, which is kind of interesting. So yeah, the objective room, one thing that's kind of notable is that the gates, they start open and they are wide gates, which means anything goes in the objective room as long as you can fit somewhere in there. You can go through the doors. So anyone can go and have a party in there. There's also 1 tactical support option. So you'll draw your 1 tactical support card as well. It was kind of funny. I was just telling Ian before we started recording that in my last game, I drew the cancel a tactical support card. So we had the really engaging process of drawing cards to then both realize that it didn't matter that we drew cards.
Yeah.
So, it happens.
It's also, in this mission, especially if the attacker draws the one where a specialist gets an automatic success on a mission objective roll, that's super
Huge.
Powerful. Just going, cool. I don't care about this minus 6 to extract. So that's super awesome.
Yeah, the order expenditure that you would save by just grabbing it right off the bat, I think it's well worth the loss of 1 objective point for not unlocking it first.
Yeah, and you can always unlock it later if you have the opportunity.
Yeah, I suppose that's true. Using the antenna isn't predicated on the data still being there. So that's kind of interesting. But yeah, so that is generally how you score points in critical intervention. The attacker wants to go in, get the data, and get out alive, and then have some other troops dominate the room. The defender wants to keep them from doing so, dominate the room, and kill off more defenders, generally speaking.
Yep. And then while it has a classified, it also has Intocom for support and control. So you could alternately choose at the start of the game to use your card for that to add the card's points to the zone instead of getting that objective point.
Right, which, if you don't have great options and don't feel confident in securing HVT/treasure, then that might be the way to go, especially if you get one of the higher pointed cards, considering for the defender, that's 3 points to hold the room. So
yeah,
sometimes that's enough to tip the scales there just by
throwing 15 or 20 extra points in.
Right, yeah. And then the kind of last wrinkle for this mission is that because the defender is defending their facility, they have an option to spend an additional command point for strategic use before the game starts to either activate 2 combi rifle turrets that are in the room in opposite corners, or they can spend a command token to be allowed to deploy up to 65 points of troops in the room. Normally, they cannot deploy in the room. You can deploy around the room because the exclusion zone only applies to the attacker. but you can't deploy in the room without spending this command token. And the inhibitor antenna that's used to unlock the data console, the defender can use that during the game to turn on the defense system and activate those turrets. So,
Yes.
in my experience, I'm generally much more tempted to deploy troops in the room
Hmm.
because there's no other way to do that, whereas you can turn on the turrets later. I mean, maybe by then it doesn't matter as much, depending on how aggressively successful your opponent was in the first turn, but in my experience, it's generally pretty hard to just go in and snag the data right off the bat.
Importantly, though, when you spend that command point to deploy up to 65 points of troops in the room as the defender, not only is that an addition to your normal strategic use, so you can do that and a strategic use, but the entirety of the objective room counts as part of your deployment zone, so you do not need to use troops with advanced deployment skills to deploy there. You can deploy anything.
True. Yeah. That's a good thing to note. That
In
yeah,
the
they don't
entire
have
thing,
to.
even the portion on the opponent's side of the board too.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So you can that just becomes area you can deploy in normally. It's kind of interesting. I didn't think
Mhm.
about the implication of if you have forward deployment, and if that is part of your DZ, can you forward deploy out on the other side of the room?
I don't believe so,
I don't
because
think so either, but
yeah,
that
only because the restriction is that you can deploy in the room. Um, so I don't believe that you could use forward deployment to deploy outside of the room.
yeah, I would assume not. It was just kind of a question that came to mind right now as we were talking about it, but yeah, I would assume not because that doesn't really that seems like that would be a little awkward rules wise. But yeah,
Yeah,
so that
and it
kind
does
of
specify deployed in the server room. So, yeah, no, you would not be able to deploy outside the server room with extra forward deployment.
sure. Yeah, fair enough. So that kind of sets the stage for what you're trying to do in the mission. But with that, what are some things that kind of come to mind as, why don't we start as the attacker's perspective?
Mhm.
What sorts of things strike you as valuable as far as like general like list styles or types of units that really um, are going to excel or things that you're going to want those sorts of tools in this mission?
uh, Fast units that can do the template direct shot arrow fork. That is going to be absolutely key because, in my mind, the defender is almost always going to spend that command point to deploy troops in the room. They're not going to generally use it to turn on the turrets. I think that the troops in the room is more valuable overall, considering how many points are tied up with dominating that room and keeping the attacker out of it and from
Hmm.
accomplishing the objectives. So anything that can get there very fast, bikes are going to be great for this because they have mimetism. They're fast. A lot of them have some form of template as well as a direct fire weapon so that you can force bad decisions on the opponent.
Hmm.
A lot of them are specialists on their own, so to be able to grab the data pack early, just things they can get in there and clear the room. That's going to be, I think, where the value is. And then if they manage to grab the data pack and can quickly get back to their deployment zone and hide, I think that's just even that much more valuable.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, I agree. Speed is definitely a premium. I feel like I would want to take the approach of vision control
Mhm.
because you don't necessarily know what all your opponent is going to have available to you in the room.
Yeah.
And so being able to kind of move in. and have some cover, whether they turn the turrets on or they have troops in there instead, and being able to move in that way, I think is very valuable. So if you can also put smoke on those fast troopers or disco ballers or similar, I think that will help a lot because I feel like it is very easy to blow through an order pool trying to clear out defenders in that room if your opponent is starting off with a bunch of troops that they've decided can hold down the fort well. Like that's been the experience of most of my games when I'm defending the room, is that it's very, very difficult to actually get the data out, especially first turn. Like I don't think I've seen, or I haven't been part of a game of critical intervention where either player's been able to extract the data turn one. So it's and all of them have been, well, I think one game someone turned on the turrets instead. But generally speaking, it's
Yeah.
usually troops in the room. And so yeah, I think vision control can help a lot with that, especially on non-hackable pieces. I think being hackable is a real liability going into that room because I know one of the things that I try and do is I always try and put a repeater in that room in some capacity. And yeah, so it can get a little tricky. But yeah, so fast, something with vision control, uh, things with templates are really good. Things that are good at clearing objective rooms in general, like things you would want for, say, armory. I guess armory is not on the current docket anymore, is it?
No, it's not.
Yeah. But things you would want for generally clearing small rooms like that, short range weapons and templates and the like, can help a lot. Guided, potentially, if there's
Yeah.
something exceptionally stubborn there. But I feel like that's more of a defender tool than an attacker tool. But that's not exclusively the case. But yeah, so those things I think will definitely help when you're trying to assault the room. And I think that that's kind of a running theme for a lot of missions this season is getting somewhere fast. Like making sure you have order efficiency to move somewhere and take over that area. I would also say having some sort of durable specialist is a good idea because whoever gets the data pack needs to live the entire game.
Yes.
Like a lot rides on that. And so if you have someone who's going to grab that, ideally it's something that can take a hit or is otherwise difficult to attack. So they might be, multi-wound characters, ideally not hackable, but I suppose if they are hackable, it's not the worst because if they get out and are in your DZ, they still have to be killed. Just disabling them isn't enough. But yeah. So I think that those things will definitely go a long way in terms of getting to the room, getting the job done, getting out. What about the defender?
The defender, especially if you are starting with troops in the room, in my mind, you want, depending on what your opponent is taking, so you might want to make lists based on opponent if this is in your tournament lineup, because this could come up more or less. But you're going to want things in the room that have templates. Also, basically doing the arrow fork thing, but like templates and shotguns, because you want things that are walking in those doors to really not want to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Camouflage, so that you control the engagement. That's great to have in there. Things that can
Mm-hmm.
cover the routes of advance to the room. So like snipers or models with neurosynetics or things like that, extra bursts that can make it difficult for the opponent to advance. This is where depending what your opponent's playing comes in. Hackers, because if they're throwing in
Mm-hmm.
something that's gonna have a durable guy that's super armory, maybe you're just hacking him and he's not getting in or out of there on time. The other thing, because you're going to be in close quarters, close combat specialists. If you can dodge into somebody and then force them to kill you, especially if it's going to be really hard for them to do that, that's great.
Yeah, absolutely. I saw some of that. Actually, my opponent was the attacker, and they were playing Shinin Mutai, and I was playing Tunguska. And so I did not have the upper hand in CC engagements by a long shot.
But you still make them waste orders by throwing guys into CC with them.
I mean, that's true. Like,
Not
you can
ideal,
still slow them down, but only barely in this particular instance. But yes, generally speaking, I certainly agree. Yeah, I agree. I think that ways that you can interact with your opponent outside a line of fire are great. So, of course, hacking, I often put a flash bot in the room. And, sometimes I try and tuck it in the corners where it's not as likely to be seen. And just so it's a repeater. And I put it on a side that is towards my opponent's end of the table. And so they kind of have to pay attention to an 8-inch bubble coming off the corner of that room all of a sudden. I think that jammers are great. I've used the heckler jammer in the room before that works really well for that. Though he's also got forward deployment, so he could deploy up to the wall of the room. Oh, no, not quite. He'd be... No, it would be right about the wall. Yeah, because it's 8-inch square from the center. Yeah, math. But yeah, so jammers are great for that sort of thing. Templates, like Ian said, are great for that. Things that your opponent has to worry about. Especially if they're like EM templates. Because barring Warhorse, even if it doesn't turn off the unit, like it doesn't immobilize them also, that still means they're not receiving orders. And so that run has just shut down until something changes. And usually something with an Emarat is most likely going to have some other close range weapon that can be lethal if they do want to try and reset or something on their turn. I guess excepting puzzlers. But almost everything else will at least have like some sort of pistol.
Yeah.
But yeah, and again, close combat is good for both sides because you're forced into a very small space. So that is an easy place to put those sorts of things. So like my Tunguska checklist for such things tends to be a flashbot for a repeater, a Zellenkrieger that can potentially like throw smoke so that people can't shoot in from outside the room, and is also competent in close combat, has a template weapon, and then disposable units. So in my case, I like to use puppet bots. So they're durable, relatively speaking. They're effective 2 wounds. They have usually close range weapons because I'm taking the shotgun forward observer variants, and they're just in the room waiting. If somebody wants to come in, those little bunny bots are going to fire shotgun shells at them.
Yeah. When the list I've been running for it is 3 Barsuk with heavy flamethrowers and light shotguns and decoy. So here's 6 camo markers in the room. Figure out what's what. And then depending on what my opponent is taking, I'm running either a war driver to get a hacker in there because Ariadna, or a dog warrior because nobody wants extra burst chain rifles and close combat up in there. And again, being able to throw the smoke if they don't have MSV helps me control the engagement because then they get close and the dog warrior can just start shredding them in CC.
Sure. Yeah, so add to the list for attacker tools. Sensor.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't tend to play factions that have a ton of camouflage. Like some, but not very much. And certainly not cheap camouflage usually. But yeah, sensor is a great tool for that as well because, like Ian said earlier, Defender having markers that you also have to spend extra time dealing with is just another method of slowing down that assault. So, yeah, I think that gives us a rough breakdown of kind of the tools that would be helpful. And now, one of the things that we like to do when we go over a mission briefing episode is talk about the role of initiative and how do you want to handle the mission if you win or if you win the lieutenant role. And I feel like that is no better exemplified than in critical intervention. Like, it is such a huge game altering choice. Like, beyond just, first or second turn, it completely transforms how you want to play the game. So, Ian, I know, we've talked about you tend to be more of an aggressive player and I tend to be more
Mhm.
of a defensive player. I already know my answer is that I tend to want to go second so I can defend the room.
Mhm.
Do you want to defend the room or do you want to attack the room?
I want to defend the room.
Okay. I wasn't sure.
No. This I've actually been enjoying this season because of the way the missions are set up, and a lot of it is actually making me want to go second in a lot of the missions, and this is one of them.
Mm-hmm.
So uh, I am fully confident that the list I'm running can do great on the attack, but it is better when it's defending.
Yeah, and part of the reason, one, I just naturally tend to be a little bit more defensive playing the game, but I think it's also that for the defender, most of the points in the game are just kind of defending the status quo that's set from the beginning of the game. Like, it's just make sure your opponent doesn't get the chance to do this, that they can't
Mhm.
do that, that you sit in the room, that you already have points in, probably. Like, the only points that require active play, generally speaking, are, and even then, not necessarily, um, killing 150 points of troops, and then one that does require active play is the classified. And so everything else, theoretically, you don't have to take actions to accomplish. Now, obviously, you will need to do so because your opponent will have their plan kind of develop and have ways to circumvent your static defenses. But generally speaking, defender just needs to keep things the way they are.
Yeah. This is also where Mind Layer would be a good thing for the defender.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, another thing that would be gross if you were able to deploy outside the bounds of the room somehow, like with forward deployment.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, oh, here's my couple forward deployment mine layers in the room, and they're on your side. Ta-da! But yeah, so since you uh, are also generally wanting to hold the room, um, so that's my thought process. What is your thought process about wanting to go second and wanting to hold the room and be the defender if you have the choice?
So to me, the mission, it incentivizes going second. And there's a lot of missions that incentivize going second because of scoring at end of round. But this one incentivizes going second in my mind differently because I think that being the defender, especially if you purpose build your list to do that and get to go second, it becomes very difficult for the attacker to be successful with a good list and a good deployment. Obviously, table's going to factor into this.
Mm-hmm.
Faction matchup's going to factor into this. But in general, I think a list that is designed to go second is going to do very well, which, don't get me wrong, it sounds like I'm saying that going second is the better option. And I do think it is to some degree, but it's that I think it swings hard in that, unlike most missions where there's a potential to deploy first, go first, or deploy second and go second, or deploy first and go second. Like, there's a combination of factors between the player choice because the attacker defender is completely decided about who's going first and second. That it kind of, the balance is that if you're decided that you're going second, it's just that you are attacker. They get all the advantage of going first and having all their forces and getting to use all their orders and do as much damage as possible. So being the defender and having a prepared position, I think they balance well off of each other. But I want to go second.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah, I think that an attacker can certainly succeed, but I do think that mostly because, like I said, everything is kind of already in the defender's favor from the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you are playing through the game and the attacker manages to make very little headway, the defender just wins fairly handily.
Yeah.
Whereas in other missions, it's that both players are trying to accomplish the same objectives, but both players have to accomplish something. They have to do something. And with the defender, most of your points are not that, which I think is really interesting. But I think that it makes being the defender easier, generally speaking.
Mm-hmm. And I think that also the way that the objective point breakdown is, I think it favors the defender in terms of less complexity in how to score.
Sure.
Because the attacker, it's, do I unlock the data console? Have I gotten the pack extracted? Have I kept my guy alive? Have I gotten him into my DZ? That's all related to what's going on in the objective room. And then, okay, if I dominate the server room, and can I kill some stuff? It's 75 points. You're almost assuredly going to get that as the attacker. It's, yeah, there are games where the attack where one side doesn't hardly kill anything, but I find that's a little bit on the rare side. I think 75 points is a pretty low bar to hit to get an objective point.
Generally, yeah.
But for the defender, it's, do they unlock the console, or can I keep him from unlocking the console? Cool, there's a point. Can I prevent him getting the data out? There's 3 points. Oh, did they get the data out? I just have to kill that guy, and I still get 2 of the 3 points instead of of preventing him from getting it in the first place. And then dominating the server room being 3 points. And then yes, you have to kill more guys at 150 points, but I think with the simplicity of the flow chart of how to score points on this, having to kill more points, and you're killing 150 to get 2 points instead of 75 to get 1 point. So it's actually roughly the same. You just have to hit that threshold to get any points from it.
Sure.
But you say there's less steps involved, both in terms of how it scores and how you get to that score. So I do think the defender has an easier time getting their points than the attacker does. The attacker just has the advantage of being able to dictate the flow of the turn by going first and having all of the resources that they start with.
Right. And so let's say you win the lieutenant role. Are you generally just going to lock in, cool, I'm choosing initiative, I'm taking second turn?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, fair.
Because honestly,
I think that
deployment, if you are the defender, I feel like deployment order almost doesn't matter, because and actually deploying first in that situation might even be of benefit, because yes, they know where your stuff's going to be, but the fact that you can now lock down routes of advance and have stuff in the room and basically just say, yeah, I am dictating how you're going to advance, because you have to deal with this, and this, and you're going to have to spend orders doing that unless you can find a way to circumvent this. It doesn't matter that, in my mind, that they know where you're deploying. I don't think that the deploying second advantage is as big with the way the mission's structured.
Yeah, I tend to agree, especially with the objective room being infinitely tall. It's
Hmm.
not like you're as readily going to have those counter deployments with long range weapons where, oh, there's a trooper, I'll be able to see it. I'm going to deploy somewhere where I can immediately attack it if you activate them and things like that. Like that sort of hard counter deployment, I just feel like is less likely to come up.
Well, and honestly, it's even if they do that, it's almost still in the defender's favor because in order to make use of that, they're still spending orders to try to take out your ARO pieces so that things can advance. Like
Hmm.
I still see that as kind of a win, especially if your ARO pieces can make them spend more than one order doing so.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I think that it's definitely defender favored, which again kind of makes sense in the fiction of the mission. He's
Hmm.
kind of okay, you have a fortified position, you are already there and ready, and someone is coming in to try and take your stuff. And so I think that that's really interesting. Do you think that that makes this kind of a dubiously balanced mission competitively?
No. And the reason I say that is because of how the points break down, and that while the defender has an easier time of because they have a simpler objective set, the fact is that they each one of the objectives that the defender is trying to get is worth more victory points on average than what the attacker is going for. The defender only has two 1 point objectives: prevent the unlock and the classified. They have
Hmm.
two 2 points, which is kill the extracted trooper if they've extracted and kill 150 points, and they have two 3 point objectives of prevent the extraction and dominate the room. The attacker has a wider spread of options to get the points. They have four 1 point objectives: unlock the console, extracting troopers alive, kill 75 points, and a classified. And then they have
Hmm.
three 2 point objectives of extract the data pack, extract the troopers in their own deployment zone, and dominate the server room. So the threshold to achieve those points is easier for the attacker, and they have more options to get some points. So I think that the attacker is going to, in many cases, especially if played smart, they're going to be able to eke out the points to pull ahead, whereas the defender is going to have a hard time because their threshold to get the points is higher in the first place. So, like I said, getting 75 points of kills, that's pretty easy to do. Killing 150 points, that's a little bit of a different story. Depending on the matchup and in the
Yeah.
tactics involved, that can actually be kind of hard. And I dominate the server room for 2 points. Cool. If I don't get those 2 points, or if I can deny you as the defender is 3 points for that. So again, that's a mutually exclusive a scoring there. Either one
Hmm.
side is dominating or the other is. And while the attacker only gets two from it, those 2 points might swing them ahead when they're denying the opponent 3 points for the same objective.
Yeah, and that's kind of the story of most of the objective points involved, right? Like almost
Yeah.
all of them, other than the kills
And the
and the
classified.
classifieds. Like all of these are mutually exclusive
Hmm.
for, each thing one to one, which is pretty interesting. And I mean, it does mean that generally speaking, like this is a very hard mission to draw in because of that,
Yeah.
which is probably a good thing. Like it's good to like have clear outcomes for a mission.
Hmm.
But yeah, I generally agree that I feel like the choice when the lieutenant role is one is you're deciding what your role is, and that that's far more important than the deployment by and large. I mean, maybe there are some tables where it just really, really matters, but I it would have to be a pretty severe table, I think, to outweigh choosing to play the mission how you want to play it.
Yeah. They say this is a mission where the traditional idea of the double handicap of I'm going second and deploying first, I don't think is really an issue. In fact, that's probably what I'm going to be going for because I want to go second if I have the option.
Right. Yeah. And if you're deploying first as the defender, that's not really a massive detriment.
Nope.
So, yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think that it is pretty interesting for that reason.
Mm.
Um,
I think the
and
challenge though
then,
with the mission is because it's not a guarantee that whether you're going to go first or second based on that role. Your whichever list you pick does have to be prepared to fill either role. So
exactly.
you could have a list that is like this is the perfect defender list. It does this, this, and this, and it's just absolutely perfect. And it's gonna be really hard, tough nut to crack, and it's gonna be, you can't get through it. But what
Yeah.
happens when your opponent wins the role and now you're the attacker? Do you have the tools to be successful as the attacker?
Right, right. Yeah, I have this brick wall of defenses, but I don't have any diving pieces or whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Yeah, I agree. And that's kind of an interesting list building challenge, especially considering it in a lineup. Would you consider this and we know this depends based on the other missions, but would you say that this is generally a weird enough mission that you would want to build a list more or less for this? Like this would be your one off or maybe your 3-2 split mission?
Yes. Honestly,
And
if there was this mission and like say crossing lines, because they both have the kind of the spend a thing to do the or the guys that
extra deployment
deploying
zone.
the extra deployment zone thing.
Hmm.
I think that you could make a really good list that would work for both of those missions because they do deploy in such a different fashion, and then have a different list for the other three missions in the tournament. But
Yeah,
I do think that, especially if you're it's a 3 mission tournament, I think this is your odd man out mission, and this is your weird list.
gotcha. Yeah, I am kind of inclined to think that it is a mission that favors balanced general lists. And so I
Hmm.
don't know if I would build for it separately. And
Fair.
the main reason I say that is because I think a lot of this season kind of wants the same things.
Hmm.
And so, can you get to the room fast? Can you efficiently grab the objective and or clear the room versus, do you have good ARO pieces in a variety of ways? Like can you layer defenses effectively? Do you have AROs that are good at a distance to cover the room? Do you have good arrows up close that that might normally be your corner guards that instead will just be in the room? Do you
Hmm.
have asymmetric options to attack with your jammers or hacking or Farrowware or whatever? So I think that it generally asks for a solid, well-rounded list in general. And so for
Hmm.
that reason, I don't think that this would be my oddball list.
Fair. I do think that whatever list that you're going to run for this, I think that if this is in the lineup, your list needs to have a plan in list construction for what your 65 points that you're putting into the objective room are. And whether or not you're putting those in
Hmm.
the room because you might be the attacker, I think that you need to have an idea of, even in a generalist list, what are you putting in the room?
Yeah. Yeah. I think having an idea when you write the list is a good idea. But I think that if you have a decent generalized list, like what you might use as like your corner guards, for instance, are things that
Mhm.
naturally find themselves wanting to be in the room. And it may depend on your opponent.
Yeah.
Like if I, for instance, if I was talking earlier about my go-to with Tunguska, for example, is a flashbot, a warband, maybe a jammer, and maybe some peripherals.
Mhm.
Well, if my opponent is Ariadne, I might skip the flashbot and use it backfield more as like a
Mhm.
either you know DZ coverage or a longer range flash pulse or things like that.
Yeah. Well, and even the jammer is of middling use against certain builds of Ariadna because there is a serious amount of Warhorse going around in some of the factions, especially in TAC.
Sure. Yeah, exactly. And so that it kind of allows you to have a little bit of flexibility in terms of what you might put in there instead.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I think I agree with you in terms of having a rough plan is definitely a good idea. But I
Mhm.
think that having some flexibility in thinking about what you will need in there in a particular matchup will help quite a bit.
Yeah. Well, and that's also where, like I was saying, if my opponent is heavily susceptible to hacking, I'm probably going to put the War Driver in there because where we're at now, we don't have repeaters, so that
Hmm.
helps out immediately right there. But if they're not likely to be throwing, power armor into the room, Dog Warrior, absolutely fantastic. Just make it unappealing to get in there. I'm probably putting
Hmm.
the 3 bar 6 in there regardless because the 6 camo markers
Right.
with the arrow fork is just good no matter what. But that
Yep.
said, okay, so now say I'm the attacker. Cool. I have a dog warrior. That's a perfect thing to ram in there because he's got smoke. So unless they've got
Hmm.
MSV, he's got smoke that he can get up there pretty quickly
Yeah.
and
And
start going into CC or templating stuff. So that's a
yeah,
good one where it works on either side. The
for
other stuff I
sure.
have in the list that works good for if I'm the attacker, like I have a core fire team and it, line Kazakhs, but it has several specialists in it so that I can advance and get in the room of specialists, especially after the dog warrior's gone in. I have a
Hmm.
few other troops in there that give me options to come at that room from some different angles. So yeah, the list, it is built to do both, and everything in it
Hmm.
has a kind of a spot to shine, whether I'm attacking or defending. It's better at defending.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And the dog warrior was exactly where my mind went when you were talking about if you need to attack instead.
Mhm.
Because
Well,
yeah,
actually, it
I
was kind
don't.
of funny. The last game, the dog warrior was in there, and my opponent dropped. They had a hidden deployment a year that popped up and was going to be a
Mm-hmm.
problem. So the dog warrior actually just because he's already there, basically just charged out of the room and went and took care of the Air. But
Nice.
situationally, like I said, normally I would just leave him in there, but situationally, in that game, it was yes, I'm going to do this because the Air with the triangulated fire was something I wasn't accounting for having to deal with.
Right. Right.
So nope, we're going to go send the dog warrior to deal with that because I'm tired of this nonsense.
Right. Yeah, and the IR, I assume it was one of the ones that had, I believe they had forward deployment, right?
Yes.
Off the top of my head. The one thing that is kind of interesting to keep in mind, because this is a change from previous seasons, is the exclusion zone is a 4-inch band on either side of the center. So it's an 8-inch
Yes.
wide exclusion
It
zone this
covers
season.
the room
Yeah,
and
just the room
to the
across.
sides. Yeah.
Yeah, so units with infiltration and forward deployment can actually get some extra use. Like if you have forward deployment 8 inches or infiltration, you can deploy up against the outer wall of the building on your side,
Yeah.
and so you can get some extra order efficiency back in that way. Whereas previous seasons, it was 8 inches on either side for missions that had exclusion zones. And so that's just something to keep in mind because if you've been playing for a while, you might be accustomed to 16-inch wide exclusion bands. That is not the case this season. All the exclusion zones are 8-inch wide total from the center, which
Yes.
is pretty significant.
Hmm.
So, yeah. Yeah, it's really an interesting mission. And I think that we're just about ready to transition over to final thoughts. But I did want to take a moment to say thank you to those of you who support the show. We've had an influx of new Patreon members lately. And so thank you very, very much for being willing to support us financially. That helps us a lot. Uh, again, all of this goes back into the show. I don't pay ourselves out of pocket for this or anything like that. We just try and use these things to make the show better, whether it be subscription costs or replacement or new equipment or special projects or things like that. So thank you very, very much for helping us make
Mhm.
the show even better. And if you're interested in joining that cadre, you can find us over at patreon.com/metachemistry. And in return, we try and show our gratitude with a couple different fun benefits, like final voting on polls, early access to episodes. There's some private channels on the Discord that you can hang out in, things like that. And if that's not something that it interests you, we'd love to have you on the Discord anyway. It's a great community that we have here, and we just love chatting infinity. Like if you want to talk about lists or show off paint jobs or terrain projects or whatever the case may be, you can find our Discord in the description below, and we'd love to have you there. Plus, it enters you in for that Mo Games giveaway each month, so take a look for that. And so, with that said, Ian, final thoughts on critical intervention.
I think this might actually be my favorite mission of the new lineup, to be honest. It's something very new. We haven't had asymmetrical missions before. We've had some nods to it with the way that Resilience Ops works, but a custom, fully designed asymmetrical mission we haven't had before. And I really like how they've done it. It's a very difficult thing to make a balanced asymmetrical mission. I think that while obviously, the defender does have the advantage here, I think that the mission is still fairly balanced overall, and that the attacker does have lots of opportunities to score points. And I really like that this mission is part of the lineup. I like the idea of it, and I'm hoping that CB does more missions like this in the future, because it's a cool concept. And one of the other things, we've talked about how it kind of ties into the baseline lore concept of Infinity, and I think it does that in kind of a way that like none of the other missions really do, because it's always both sides are showing up and trying to do the same thing. And then this one is like, no, one side is like actually defending, and the other side is trying to accomplish the objective. And so it kind of ties into that baseline Black Ops mission lore quite well. So I'm hoping they do more missions like this, looking at different asymmetrical objectives and things, and really, see if they can push this style a little bit more, because I'm super enjoying it. I think it's cool, and I would like to see more of it.
Yeah, for sure. Like I generally feel the same way. Like it's really interesting. It's very different than we've seen in ITS otherwise. And I think it's a fun mission. And
Mhm.
it just kind of has this nice balance um, of being kind of a novel mission, it having a really interesting and evocative story that kind of naturally comes out of the gameplay. And it's yeah, it's just a very unique mission that I appreciate having in the packet. And I don't know if it is like a snap lock for Defender, but it does feel like it is Defender favored, mostly for reasons that we've already talked about. But I do think that I need to try it more as the attacker.
Mhm.
I keep finding myself the first time or two I played it, I think people wanted to be the attacker, and then I just wanted to be the defender anyway. And so the other couple times I've played it, I've still been the defender. So I need to force myself not to take second turn and try as the attacker, so I can have more experience that way.
Yeah.
And I think those sorts of things just in general make you a better player, is playing under conditions that are not necessarily ideal, because you're not always going to have things go the way you want. And say if everyone wants to be the defender, you're not always going to be the defender then, because somebody's going to win on that role, and you're going to have to adapt. So yeah, so hopefully some of these tips and tricks have been helpful for you. And so if you have your own, or methods that you've found helpful in this mission, or other ideas, we'd love to hear them. So feel free to comment the episode wherever you like to listen, or you can drop in on Discord and give us feedback there, or wherever works. We'd love to hear from you. So yeah, on behalf of Metachemistry, this has been Devin
And Ian, and that's the meta.